$125,000.
I know you're kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding you. It's a wonderful, yes.
Really?
It's a wonderful painting.
You've got to be kidding me. 30 to 50,000?
30 to 50,000. I would feel very confident in saying that.
Welcome to our channel. Today, we're uncovering the paintings that produced some of the biggest fortunes in Antiques Roadshow history. Some were bought for just a few dollars. Others spent decades hanging unnoticed in family homes. But each one turned out to be a remarkable masterpiece worth far more than anyone ever imagined. Subscribe, ring the bell, and let's discover the paintings that transformed ordinary owners into unexpected millionaires. To begin today's countdown, we have a painting whose true value is almost impossible to believe. What if watching an episode of Antiques Roadshow was the very reason you discovered that a hidden treasure had been hanging on your wall for 40 years? That's exactly how this story began. One familiar name mentioned during the program prompted the owner to rush downstairs and take a closer look at a painting the family had always considered nothing more than ordinary home decor.
I was watching Antiques Roadshow, and in the feedback booth, a gentleman stated that he found out his CORTÈS was a fake. And a light bulb went off, and I ran downstairs, and sure enough, this painting that had been hanging on our wall for 40 years said Édouard CORTÈS.
The painting had belonged to the guest's grandparents, who were both artists and often brought artworks home from their travels across Europe. But finding the name Édouard CORTÈS on a painting certainly didn't guarantee it was authentic. His romantic views of Paris remain highly sought after by collectors, making him one of the most frequently forged artists on the market. Rather than focusing on the signature, the appraiser searched for a far more revealing clue. CORTÈS was known for using a tiny pin to establish the vanishing point before completing a painting. If that pinhole was still present and every perspective line converged precisely toward it, the chances of the painting being genuine increased dramatically.
So let's see if we can find a little pinhole. Yeah, a little pinprick right here. So it could be good news. Do you see that?
Yes, I do. I thought it was a flaw.
No. If you look at the lines, they all converge and come to this point.
That tiny pinhole was only the beginning. Combined with the brushwork, the handling of light, the composition, and the family's well-documented ownership history, every piece of evidence pointed toward the same conclusion. For collectors of CORTÈS' iconic Paris street scenes, those details make all the difference. At that point, the appraiser had little doubt left. All that remained was revealing a valuation the family had never imagined.
I think there's no question that this work is in fact by Édouard CORTÈS. For an 18 by 22 inch canvas, at auction, that should be worth $30,000 to $50,000.
You've got to be kidding me.
Within just a few minutes, a painting that had quietly hung on the same wall for 4 decades was confirmed as an authentic work by one of the most celebrated painters of early 20th century Paris. What had long been overlooked as an ordinary family possession suddenly became an artwork worth as much as $50,000. And remarkably, the entire journey began with nothing more than an evening spent watching Antiques Roadshow and a moment of curiosity that changed everything. If the previous painting proved that a hidden treasure could spend decades unnoticed on a family wall, this next story shows that a priceless artwork can begin with something far more ordinary. There was no famous collector, no prestigious auction, and no fortune behind it. Instead, it all started with a wife who quietly saved $5 from the family's grocery budget every week for 2 years, hoping to surprise her husband with the one gift she knew he would truly cherish.
Well, I inherited this painting from my parents. My mother wanted to give my father a gift that he would really love. And he loved reading to his children books that had illustrations.
After finally saving enough money, she didn't buy a painting for him herself. Instead, she took him to Frank Schoonover's studio and let him choose his favorite. Surrounded by countless works, he selected the illustration Privateers of '76, and from that day on, it never left the family. It was far more than an ordinary painting. Frank Schoonover was one of the leading illustrators of the Brandywine School, celebrated for his historically accurate and richly detailed artwork. This illustration was created for a novel by Ralph D. Payne, and the handwritten label on the back still identifies it as the original artwork used when the book was published in 1923.
There is a label which actually is handwritten, and maybe by Schoonover himself, that says it's from chapter 13. The title of the illustration is "At a hail from the boat, he went to the rail." At the hail of the boat, meaning the one below, the figure on top comes to the rail. Now, Schoonover, of course, is one of the premier artists of the Brandywine School, and he studied with Howard Pyle, who's...
Today, original illustration art is no longer considered secondary to fine art. Collectors actively seek works with documented provenance, especially those purchased directly from the artist and preserved by the same family for generations. That remarkable history, combined with its complete ownership record, made this painting significantly more valuable. At last, the moment the family had been waiting for had arrived.
He is popular as an illustrator nationwide. If this were in a gallery, I think that it would sell in the range of $125,000.
I know you're kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding. It's a wonderful, yes.
Really?
It's a wonderful painting.
My father would be so thrilled to know that people were being turned on to illustrations.
The appraiser's valuation left the entire room speechless. Yet for the owner, the most unforgettable part wasn't the number itself. His thoughts immediately turned to his father, who had chosen this very painting, and to his mother, who had quietly sacrificed small household expenses to make that moment possible. 2 years of saving just a few dollars each week ultimately gave the family not only a treasured keepsake, but also one of the most valuable illustration paintings ever featured on Antiques Roadshow. After 2 stories about paintings carefully preserved by the same families for generations, the next portrait presents a very different mystery. Its greatest value wasn't its market price, but the identity of the artist who created it. For more than a century, the painting survived with little more than a few old letters, family stories, and an unfinished search for its true origins.
Do you have any background information about this picture?
And then, about 1920s, a Mr. K wrote from Calcutta, wanted to know what had happened to Mrs. K because he thought she had the original draft of this picture.
Those few surviving records once led many people to believe the portrait might have been painted by George Romney or Sir Thomas Lawrence. But for the experts, family tradition was only the starting point. The real answers were hidden in the painting itself. They carefully examined the brushwork, facial features, lighting, and overall composition. The longer they studied it, the clearer it became that the portrait didn't match the style of either Romney or Lawrence. Instead, every detail pointed toward a lesser-known artist whose work fit the painting remarkably well.
And in my opinion, I don't think it's by either of those 2 artists. This picture, in my opinion, again, is probably most likely by an artist called Sir William Beechey.
Although Sir William Beechey isn't as famous today as some of his contemporaries, he was one of the leading portrait painters supported by the British royal family during the reign of King George III. His balanced compositions, calm style, and natural portrayal of his subjects were exactly the qualities the experts recognized in this painting. Combined with its remarkably well-preserved condition after more than 2 centuries, the portrait was finally being appreciated as a genuine work of British art. Only one question remained the final valuation.
I would think that a picture like this, fully accepted as by Sir William Beechey, is probably going to be worth somewhere in the region of sort of 15, maybe as much as £20,000.
What is that?
After generations of unanswered questions, the portrait had finally reclaimed its place in the history of British art, transforming what had long been an anonymous family heirloom into a recognized work with both historical significance and lasting value for collectors. The first 3 paintings earned their value through remarkable histories, proven provenance, or the identity of the artist behind them. This next story reveals something entirely different. Even when 2 paintings are created by the very same artist, their values can be worlds apart. The owner brought in 2 works by Alfred East, simply hoping to learn what they were worth, but the appraisal quickly uncovered something far more surprising.
And tell me what you think about this painting.
Without seeming sophisticated myself, I like the freehand style. And I like the way that you can look at the picture in a general way, as opposed to in a relaxed way, as opposed to having to study the picture. I like the picture to speak to me,
right,
and absorb the colours and the sort of free flow of the painting.
Because this sort of painting is really out of fashion today.
Alfred East was once one of Britain's most celebrated landscape painters, admired by collectors and the aristocracy alike. But artistic taste changes over time. Rather than judging the paintings by East's reputation alone, the appraiser focused on the strengths of each individual work. In his opinion, the larger painting displayed Alfred East's familiar style but lacked a compelling focal point. The smaller painting, however, immediately stood out with its stronger composition, richer color, and a more engaging sense of life. Instead of simply depicting a garden, it invited viewers into the scene and created a much deeper emotional connection.
I think it's a much better picture than that. It's got a better composition, it's more vibrant, and actually it's a different mentality. This is based on sort of Barbizon principles, which are going to the landscape in a certain way and going to the woods and painting quite dense subjects. This is based on Impressionist principles.
That difference in composition and atmosphere ultimately created a significant gap in value. Today's art market doesn't simply reward a famous signature, it rewards the painting that best showcases an artist's creativity and skill. In this case, the smaller work was the one that truly captured the attention of collectors. After explaining the reasons behind his judgment, the appraiser finally revealed the valuations the owner had been waiting to hear.
This one, I think, really is a picture that would be desired. It's got a focal point. I can see sort of £6,000 to £8,000.
You're kidding me.
Well, why not?
Although both works carried Alfred East's name, only one truly stood out in the eyes of collectors. It was another reminder that in the art world, size alone rarely determines value. Ultimately, it's the quality of the individual painting that makes all the difference. Not every valuable painting announces itself the moment you see it. Some look so worn, damaged, and forgotten that they're easy to dismiss without a second thought. This painting was one of them. It spent decades abandoned inside an old barn, covered in dust and scarred by a large tear, leaving almost everyone convinced that whatever value it once had disappeared long ago. But that neglected condition was hiding a remarkable secret.
This much-loved picture.
I think it was in an old barn or a farm building for about 30 years. And then my father, he bought it about 20 years ago. I think it was a house sale for a few pounds. It wasn't expensive.
For years, the family believed the painting might be the work of John William Waterhouse, but no one could say for certain. The biggest problem was that it looked nothing like the paintings that made him famous. Waterhouse is best known for his pre-Raphaelite masterpieces inspired by mythology and literature. This painting, however, appeared to come from a much earlier period, before he had developed the distinctive style collectors recognize today. That unexpected difference immediately caught the appraiser's attention. Rather than seeing an unusual painting, he believed he was looking at a young artist still discovering his own voice, a stage of Waterhouse's career that is rarely seen on the market.
I personally think this is by Waterhouse, John William Waterhouse, because I think it's the young man coming into being a better painter, and before he's really decided the subjects he really wants to do.
If that assessment was correct, the painting's significance extended far beyond the famous signature. It represented a rare surviving example from the beginning of Waterhouse's artistic journey. Although years of neglect had left visible damage, most of it could still be addressed through professional conservation, making the painting even more attractive to serious collectors. With the authenticity established, there was only one question left.
I think between £5,000 and £10,000. £5,000 or £6,000.
Shock. I am shocked, I am. I thought about £500. I was so worried about the rip.
Well, it's pretty nasty. That is horrid, you know, and that's needs a lot of work doing, and so does this. But I don't see why, you know, finished and all done up, somebody might ask £20,000 for it or something.
So it's worth for me to take it and have it.
A canvas that had been left forgotten in a barn was now recognized as an important early work by John William Waterhouse, a reminder that sometimes the greatest discoveries are hidden beneath years of dust, damage, and neglect. The next collection has an even more remarkable origin. None of these paintings, woodcuts, or letters were ever purchased or hunted down by collectors. Instead, they arrived as simple gifts from an artist to the family living next door. Years later, that personal connection would become the most valuable part of the entire collection.
You have an interesting family connection with this artist, I believe.
Right. He knew my parents, and he also knew my grandparents. He lived in the same apartment building as my parents.
And the artist is?
Lionel Feininger. He wrote my parents this letter shortly after I was born.
Lionel Feininger was one of the leading figures of 20th century modern art and a prominent member of the Bauhaus movement. Yet what made this collection so extraordinary wasn't simply his reputation, it was the genuine friendship between the artist and the family who owned these works. According to the family, Feininger would personally walk next door to deliver paintings and prints, even bringing gifts to celebrate the birth of their child. Those thoughtful presents were carefully preserved for generations, never imagining they would one day become an exceptional art collection.
This was a birth gift that he gave to my parents for me. My mother always described him as walking up and ringing the doorbell and saying, "This is for the little one."
For art collectors, provenance can be just as important as the artwork itself. In this case, the letter was exactly the kind of evidence every collector hopes to find. It confirmed Feininger's personal relationship with the family and explained why the paintings, woodcuts, and correspondence had remained together for decades. That documented history made the collection almost impossible to replicate. The appraiser then delivered his final conclusion.
The letter is terrific provenance. This is the kind of provenance we dream of. And so all in all, it's going to be $40,000 to $60,000.
Wow, that's fabulous. Thank you very much.
The appraiser then delivered his final conclusion. Paintings may reappear on the market, but a complete provenance like this is extraordinarily rare. That's exactly what made this one of the most memorable appraisals ever featured on Antiques Roadshow. Not every antique portrait loses its value with time. Sometimes what disappears first is the story behind it. This portrait had remained with the same family for generations, yet all that survived were a handful of old letters and one vague clue: the K family. As for the identity of the artist, no one had ever been able to provide an answer.
Do you have any background information about this picture?
Well, all I know is a letter. So Mrs. K, way back in 1900, claimed that one of the ladies was her great-grandmother. And then about 1920s, a Mr. K wrote from Calcutta, wanted to know what had happened to Mrs. K because he thought she had the original draft of this picture.
For many years, those letters led the family to believe the portrait might be connected to George Romney or Sir Thomas Lawrence, two of Britain's most celebrated portrait painters. But the appraiser wasn't searching for answers in family stories. He searched for them in the painting itself. Every brushstroke, facial feature, lighting effect, and compositional detail was examined with care. As one possibility after another was ruled out, the evidence began pointing toward a different artist, one who was less famous but a far better match for the portrait.
And in my opinion, I don't think it's by either of those two artists. And this picture, in my opinion, again, is probably most likely by an artist called Sir William Beechey. He's very rather conservative in his brushwork.
Sir William Beechey was one of the portrait painters favored by the British royal family during the reign of King George III. His balanced compositions, restrained brushwork, and natural portrayal of his subjects were exactly the qualities the appraiser recognized in this painting. Combined with its remarkably well-preserved condition after more than 2 centuries, the portrait could finally be appreciated as a genuine and valuable work of British art. At last, the family was about to hear the answer they had waited generations to discover.
Have you ever had any idea what it might be worth? I would think that a picture like this, fully accepted as by Sir William Beechey, is probably going to be worth somewhere in the region of sort of 15, maybe as much as £20,000.
What was that?
Once regarded by the family as a painting worth only a few pounds, the portrait was now valued at £15,000 to £20,000. Yet its greatest value wasn't simply the price. After generations of unanswered questions, the painting had finally reclaimed its rightful place in the history of British art. Sometimes, the greatest discovery isn't finding an expensive painting, it's uncovering the true identity of the masterpiece itself. Coming in at number 8 is a painting whose rarity and hidden value are far more remarkable than its appearance suggests. This painting was put away for one simple reason: the owner didn't like it. She bought it for just £1, hung it on the wall for a while, then decided it looked too dark and too dull. So it was moved into the attic, where it remained forgotten for years until a roof repair unexpectedly brought it back into the light.
Well, now this isn't a bit of a state, really. It's been through the wars. We know that it's by an artist called Chamberlain, because there's a label on the back giving us his name, Christopher Chamberlain.
At first glance, it looks like nothing more than an ordinary London street after the Second World War. But the longer you study it, the more details begin to emerge. Damaged buildings, a man walking with crutches, and the quiet rhythm of everyday life transform the painting into a historical snapshot rather than a simple city scene. What makes it even more interesting is that Christopher Chamberlain never tried to romanticize the view. Instead, he captured the city exactly as it was, and that sense of realism earned the painting a place at the Royal Academy exhibition shortly after it was completed.
Did you know that in 1952 this was hung on the line in the Royal Academy at Burlington House? No. Which means that it's at eye level, which is the highest accolade that a picture could be given.
Being hung on the line meant the painting was displayed at eye level during the Royal Academy. Exhibition, the most prestigious position a work could receive. Yet, as the years passed, Chamberlain's name gradually faded from public memory, and the painting suffered the same fate. Once admired by the art world, it was eventually sold for only a single £1. That made the final appraisal all the more surprising.
I only paid £1 for it, so I thought, if it's not, I'll just get rid of it.
Well, if that's what you're going to do with it, you'd be throwing away 2,000 or 3,000 quid.
Oh!
So none of the explanation worked, but the money did.
Sometimes people only begin to see a painting differently after hearing the final number. But for the experts, its true value went far beyond the estimate. It preserved an authentic glimpse of post-war London, a piece of history that very few paintings are able to capture so vividly. Coming in next is far more than a painting of a battlefield. It captures one of the most famous and most tragic episodes in British military history, the Charge of the Light Brigade. More than a century later, the charge is still remembered as a symbol of extraordinary courage, but also as a reminder of the devastating cost of a disastrous military order.
This is one of the most romanticised moments in British military history, the Charge of the Light Brigade. And here we have, at the moment of the impact, charging through the batteries, the throat plume streaming out behind.
The painting depicts the Light Brigade's charge at the Battle of Balaclava in 1854, when hundreds of British cavalrymen rode directly into Russian artillery after a misunderstood command. Although the assault ended in disaster, it became one of the defining stories in British history. What impressed the appraiser most wasn't simply the subject itself, but the way Christopher Clark captured the chaos of the battlefield. Charging horses, drifting gun smoke, and the relentless movement of the soldiers pull the viewer into the heart of the action, making the scene feel both dramatic and immediate.
It's interesting because the painting is by not a particularly well-known artist called Christopher Clark. What I particularly like, the way that the horses surround, the fighting going on, the various movements.
Christopher Clark may not be one of Britain's best-known military painters, but his ability to tell a story through paint is what gives this work its lasting appeal. Rather than simply illustrating a battle, he conveys its speed, confusion, and emotional intensity. That storytelling quality is exactly why the painting continues to stand out, despite the artist's relatively modest reputation. After explaining what made the work so compelling, the appraiser finally revealed its value.
So in all, I think it's a masterpiece by somebody not particularly well known. We come now to value. I think this is probably somewhere in the range of £2,000 to £3,000.
That's fine, because I enjoy the painting.
An estimate of £2,000 to £3,000 may not be the highest figure in today's countdown, but the owner's reaction said everything. He treasured the painting not because of its market value, but because of the remarkable piece of history it preserves. Sometimes, the greatest achievement of a work of art isn't its price, it is its ability to bring a defining moment from the past vividly back to life. At the final spot in today's countdown is a portrait that wasn't created in an artist's studio or commissioned by the wealthy. It was drawn during the Second World War inside an ordinary boarding house where two strangers unexpectedly became friends. The man in the portrait was simply a marine engineer waiting for his ship to be repaired. But the artist holding the pencil was Stanley Spencer, one of the most important figures in 20th century British art.
Well, the artist is Stanley Spencer, one of the most important artists in Britain this century.
My father-in-law was a marine engineer. He was in Port Glasgow awaiting a convoy. The ship was in for repair for around 2 months, and my mother-in-law was also with him, and they were staying in a lodging house, and Stanley Spencer was at the same lodging house.
The two families lived together in the boarding house at Port Glasgow for nearly 2 months and gradually became close friends. They spent their evenings talking, sharing ordinary stories while Britain remained surrounded by the realities of war. Then, one evening, Stanley Spencer casually asked the engineer to sit down so he could draw his portrait. That simple moment became the heart of the story. Spencer wasn't trying to create a formal portrait or an idealized image. Instead, he focused entirely on the man's face and expression, turning an ordinary encounter into a deeply personal work of art.
They got on very well with him, and he told them all about his life in Cookham. And they were sitting one evening in this parlour, and he said, "Sit down, Jack, and I'll draw you."
Years later, Stanley Spencer came to be recognized as one of Britain's greatest painters, with major masterpieces selling for well over £1 million at auction. This portrait isn't one of those monumental works, but its appeal lies in something equally important: its story and its impeccable provenance. The family knows exactly who the sitter was, when the portrait was drawn, and the circumstances in which it was created, details that collectors always value highly. Finally, the appraiser revealed its market value.
Stanley Spencer paintings at last are getting their due recognition. A great masterpiece could be over £1 million today. But I would have thought in the region of 6 to 8, maybe £10,000.
That is a shock. I had no idea, none at all.
An estimate of £6,000 to £10,000 came as a tremendous surprise to the family. Yet the portrait's greatest value may never be measured in money alone. It preserves a chance wartime friendship between an ordinary marine engineer and an artist who would later become one of Britain's most celebrated painters. It's the kind of story that no auction house could ever recreate, making the portrait valuable not only as a work of art, but also as a remarkable piece of personal history. Coming up next is a work of art that fools almost everyone at first glance. It looks exactly like a finely painted portrait, yet it wasn't created with a brush at all. Instead, the entire image is built from countless tiny pieces of colored glass, so small they are almost invisible to the naked eye. That extraordinary craftsmanship fascinated the owner from childhood, even though she had never known the piece's true value.
It's by the artist MOGLIA, but there's a father and a son, so that's one of the things I'd like to find out. And I always loved it. I was amazed that something made from stone or ceramic could actually look like a painting.
Well, as you said, it is a micromosaic.
Micromosaic is one of Italy's most refined decorative arts, created by assembling thousands of tiny glass tesserae to produce remarkably smooth transitions of color that resemble a painted image. What makes this piece even more extraordinary is its size. Most micromosaics appear on jewelry boxes or other small decorative objects, while a plaque of this scale is exceptionally rare. But the craftsmanship is only part of the story. The image portrays Beatrice CENCI, the tragic woman whose dramatic fate made her one of the most famous figures in Italian history.
This is Beatrice. Beatrice and her stepmother were abused by her father, killed.
I believe they were beheaded.
Okay, beheaded.
Yeah.
Partly because she's so beautiful, partly because she stood up for her rights. She was both a heroine as well as a murderess.
She's a tragic hero, absolutely, yeah.
The name Moglia immediately caught the appraiser's attention. The Moglia family was renowned as one of the greatest micromosaic workshops of the 19th century, celebrated for transforming famous paintings into astonishing glass mosaics. If this piece was indeed the work of Luigi Moglia, its significance extended far beyond that of an ordinary decorative object. After carefully examining every detail, the appraiser could hardly hide his excitement.
The art of micromosaic on this sort of scale, which is actually very, very large for a mosaic, is incredibly rare and incredibly exciting to find on Antiques Roadshow. I would think an insurance valuation of $85,000.
Cool.
would be a fair price.
Excellent.
The insurance valuation reflected far more than the beauty of the artwork itself. It represented an exceptionally rare combination of masterful micromosaic craftsmanship, an unusually large format, and the image of one of Italy's most legendary historical figures. For collectors, finding all of those qualities in a single piece is extraordinarily uncommon. That's exactly why this became one of the most remarkable discoveries ever featured on Antiques Roadshow. And there you have it, our list of amazing finds. Do you agree with our picks? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more extraordinary stories and discoveries.